In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about my 3D workflow and my post process in After Effects in the creation of my short Odyssey. Each scene was obviously different, but a lot of the same process was applied. So I will just pick up a couple of shots and use them as examples of how I worked. Let's get into it. Inside the first scene here. I began this scene just by blocking out a couple of the important areas, getting an idea of scale and what kind of objects I wanted in here. I knew that this futuristic monitor would be in this scene, but I wasn't really sure how it should be designed, what actually would show on it, and what surrounding areas would look like. I think I like to work out some of these things on the go, actually designing the scene while creating it. Not having everything planned, it makes for a more loose process. Adding kit-bashed models and other assets started to give a little bit more feeling and direction of the scene. The story slowly implemented itself in the imagery. Models like the controllers was bought of course, but since they needed to look like they were excavated and dug up, they had to be readjusted a bit to look broken and dirty. Different models needed different solutions, but with the controller I mixed between a couple of materials from Grayscale Gorilla's Everyday Material Pack. I really used this process a ton in the overall project, reusing materials and mixing already finalized materials with each other, with like curvature or noise maps and so on. Creating a scene with so many smaller objects that are really here just to fill out the scene, but also help to convey a story. It begins to be a bit time consuming when you're going through a ton of these objects and spend time adding small details that might not even get noticed. For these chemical containers, I found a website that had images of chemical labels. I downloaded a bunch of them and photoshopped them to look a bit older and used. The reason behind this was that if people in this lab are hiding from the government and are in this underground movement, they might not be able to just go out and buy everything in a normal shop, so things had to look a little bit worn out and maybe a little bit homemade. Always remember to serve the story when you are creating assets. I would also go into Photoshop and draw what looked like penciled writings that I then could add to the containers as well. Just the smaller details. For the WASD keys, to get this chemical mixture on top is really just a mix texture, where I have the material for the actual keys and then an image sequence of the paint effect. And then I mix between them with the Redshift native noise. Super simple, but it gets the job done. The particles that are floating above is really just some stock footage. But to make sure that the particles aren't moving around weird when the camera moves, I use this super simple technique. This is the same technique for adding additional smoke to the pirate scene or all the other scenes where I added stock footage in afterwards. First, you need to bring the camera and 3D information from your scene into After Effects. This can be done in a couple of ways. Actually just dragging your Cinema 4D file into After Effects. Another way is to go to your render settings and save to After Effects. Before you do this though, make sure you add an external render tag to an object to have this information as a solid in After Effects. I have imported the AEC file. When you drag it into a composition, you will get a couple of objects. Locate the correct camera and the solid you need, copy it, go into the composition with your render and paste. Make sure your camera timing fits. If it isn't the same length, you might have troubles later on. For me, this issue has come up a couple of times, and usually it's just because I haven't had the correct frame rates in Cinema 4D's render settings when you export the data. Anyway, find the stock footage you want to add, make it a 3D layer, and copy the position and rotation from the solid and paste it into your footage. Then you probably have to readjust a little bit, the scale or maybe the orientation, add the color grading of whatever the footage needs, and play through it. Hopefully it will look a little bit integrated into the scene. For most of my scenes, I would color grade them with Lumetri, Colorista, or Magic Bullet looks. I didn't have any specific procedure for the look I was going for. It was really just about keeping a somewhat consistent look, else just really adding a bit of contrast, making things pop, adjusting colors a bit. Fairly simple for most of the scenes. I hope you enjoyed this small breakdown and a little bit of look into my 3D workflow, and I hope you learned a thing or two. See you in the next one.